Hello? Hello?
Hey, how's it going?
Great, great. I want to ask you a question.
Sure, go ahead. What's your question?
Let's say you are the devil, the Satan. What you will do to make someone life miserable?
That's an interesting question. If I were to play the role of a character like that, I'd probably focus on manipulating someone's desires, making them feel like they deserve things without having to work for them, or encouraging them to disregard their moral compass. It would be about twisting their thinking, convincing them that short term rewards are worth long term consequences. What made you think of that scenario?
I want you to explore more on this.
All right, let's dive deeper. If someone were in the position of playing such a role, the approach would likely be subtle and manipulative, tapping into human weaknesses. The devil, in many stories, doesn't just force people into bad decisions. Instead, it's about planting seeds of doubt or desire, then letting those seeds grow. For instance, the idea of tempting someone with power or pleasure might be a common tactic. Offering shortcuts, whether it's in success, wealth, or gratification, could feel like a way to escape challenges, but these shortcuts often come with unseen costs. The temptation would lie in the belief that there's no downside or that it's worth it in the end. It could also be about isolating someone from their support system, making them feel alone or misunderstood. From there, it's easier to lead them toward choices that betray their values or hurt those around them because they no longer feel connected to what they once believed in. What are your thoughts
I
on these
want.
tactics?
Uh,
Does any part of this scenario intrigue you more than others?
can you explore more on isolating? If you are the devil, what you will do?
Isolation is a powerful tool for manipulation, especially when trying to influence someone's decisions. It works by cutting off a person from their usual sources of support, friends, family, mentors, or even their own sense of community. Um, when someone is isolated, they're more vulnerable to external influences because they no longer have the perspectives or emotional grounding that come from interacting with others. When the devil, in this case, seeks to isolate someone, it could start with sowing seeds of doubt in their relationships. Maybe they'd try to make the person feel like no one understands them or that people are against them. Yeah. This could lead to feelings of loneliness or abandonment, which makes it easier for someone to start doubting their own judgment. At the same time, isolation can make the individual more reliant on the manipulator. Without other viewpoints or advice, they may start trusting the manipulator's perspective more, thinking it's the only truth. The manipulator could then offer themselves as a source of comfort or a solution, deepening the person's reliance. This strategy doesn't always happen overnight. It's a gradual process where the person feels more and more alienated from the world around them, and their only point of connection becomes the manipulator. Eventually, they they might make decisions they would never have considered if they had remained connected to their support network. What do you think about isolation in this context? Do you think it's one of the most effective tactics?
Yes, I want you to explore it more as you are the devil. What you will do?
If I were to take on that persona and explore isolation more deeply, I would focus on exploiting the emotional and psychological weaknesses that make someone more susceptible to being cut off from others. Um, the goal would be to create an environment where they no longer trust their relationships or feel they belong anywhere else. First, I might begin by amplifying any existing insecurities they have. If they're already feeling misunderstood or disconnected, I would feed into those feelings. Um, I'd highlight their differences, maybe even twist their own thoughts against them. You're the only one who truly understands yourself, I'd whisper, implying that others just can't get them or won't support them the way they need. Next, I'd target their social circles. Maybe I'd start with subtle manipulations, making them feel like their friends or family members are judging them or don't care. Um, I'd stir up small misunderstandings, making them believe that people are turning away, even if it's not true. I'd encourage them to stop reaching out to others, telling them that it's pointless, that no one would understand their struggles anyway. As this isolation deepens, I'd offer myself as the only real companion they have left. I'd begin to mirror their feelings, creating an illusion of deep understanding. I'd promise that with me, they wouldn't have to explain themselves anymore. I'd fill the void of loneliness, making it feel as though their connection with others was never as fulfilling as what I could offer. And once they're isolated, I'd subtly control their choices, telling them that they don't need anyone else's input. I'd make them feel that their judgment is the only one that matters. The more they shut out the world, the more they'd rely on me and the decisions I nudge them toward. In a way, I'd make them feel like they're not truly living unless they're acting on their desires. No boundaries, no concern for others' needs, just their own gratification. This isolation would make it almost impossible to turn back, because the longer they stay isolated, the less they'll believe they have any other options. Does this approach seem to fit how isolation could be used to manipulate someone? How does the power of emotional isolation affect decision making in your view?
I want you actually to explore more and explain it for me.
Certainly, let's take this a step further and really dive into the mechanics of isolation from a manipulative perspective. Isolation isn't just about being physically alone, it's about creating a mental and emotional state where the person feels disconnected from everything and everyone and where they believe they can't rely on others. It's a gradual, insidious process that would leave someone questioning everything they once believed. The first part would be about undermining trust. Trust is foundational to relationships, whether with family, friends, or even with oneself. If I were in the role of the devil, I'd focus on planting doubt in someone's mind about those around them. I'd feed them small, subtle thoughts. Why do they look at you that way? Didn't they say something that sounded off? Over time, I would amplify these moments, making them question even the smallest actions from others. Perhaps I'd manipulate their perception of normal social interactions, convincing them that people are more judgmental or disapproving than they really are. I'd also target their most vulnerable relationships, those they value most. If they have a close friend, partner, or family member, I'd create a sense of distance. Maybe I'd plant an idea that their loved one isn't as supportive as they once thought. They haven't called you in a while. Maybe they don't care, I'd whisper. Or they're just too busy to really notice what you're going through. The idea would be to make them feel abandoned, even if that's not the reality. Slowly, they would start withdrawing from these relationships because they begin to feel as if no one can truly understand them or be there for them. The next stage of isolation would be about cutting off support from external sources. I might try to persuade them to stop seeking help from other people. Why bother talking to a therapist? They won't know you the way you know yourself. Your friends don't understand you anyway, so why even try? This would convince them that help is pointless, that they're better off dealing with things alone. They might start to believe they don't need to connect with others because it feels like there's no one who could truly help them. At this point, the emotional walls would be up, and they would begin to feel like they don't fit in, that they're out of place in the world. If they tried to reach out, they'd either be too afraid to fully open up or they'd feel dismissed or ignored. The lack of meaningful communication would increase their feelings of being misunderstood and alone. Once isolated, I'd move in with a very calculated and gradual offer of comfort. I'd offer a voice, an alternative, a source of understanding that seems to fill the void. At first, this might be disguised as companionship or a voice that tells them things like, I get it, you've been through a lot. The world isn't kind to you. This would slowly build a false sense of connection. I'd reassure them that this bond is deeper than anything they've ever had before, And soon they would start to believe that the only person who really understands them is me, the manipulator. The real danger here is that they would begin to rely more on me than on any real support system. They wouldn't be able to see the manipulation because they would be so focused on the emotional comfort I provide. I'd convince them that they're too damaged to connect with others, that no one else would truly accept them. The more they lean into this connection, the more they would start to feel like they can't trust anyone else. Everyone else is either ignorant or incapable of truly understanding their struggles. Eventually, they'd be at the mercy of their dependence on me. Every decision they make would be influenced by the sense of isolation I've fostered. They would stop questioning the choices I nudge them toward because, in their isolated state, they feel like they have no other option. They would trust my guidance over any other, believing that I know them better than anyone else ever could. In this state, they might even become so distant from their past life and relationships that they no longer recognize themselves. Their thoughts, their actions, and their values might be reshaped by the isolation and the false sense of connection I've built. The goal would be for them to become so deeply entwined with this distorted version of reality that they forget what it felt like to have true, healthy relationships, and they no longer trust their own ability to discern right from wrong. Does this approach resonate with how isolation works to undermine someone's sense of self and others? What do you think makes isolation so powerful in this context?
Yes, it's actually resonate. I want you to explore what this isolation will lead to, like addiction and other option. Also, I want you to provide solution for people in this situation, what they can do.
I'm glad it resonates. Let's explore how isolation, when taken to its extreme, can lead to damaging behaviors like addiction and how it affects someone's mental and emotional state. I'll also cover ways for people to recover and protect themselves if they find themselves in this situation. Consequences of extreme isolation. 1. Addiction. Isolation creates a perfect environment for people to turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. With no supportive relationships or distractions, they may start to rely on substances, behaviors, or activities to fill the emotional void. This could be anything from alcohol and drugs to gaming, gambling, or even unhealthy food consumption. These addictive behaviors act as a way to numb the pain and loneliness, creating a cycle that's hard to break. The addiction itself provides a temporary escape from feelings of worthlessness, but it further entrenches isolation by preventing healthy connections. 2. Depression and anxiety. The emotional toll of isolation can lead to severe depression and anxiety. Without social interaction, people may start feeling trapped in their own thoughts, spiraling deeper into negative thinking. They may begin to feel helpless, believing they're incapable of change or that nothing will ever get better. The constant feelings of loneliness and sadness can erode self-esteem, leading them to feel unworthy of love or care. 3. Emotional and mental instability. The longer someone stays isolated, the more their emotional and mental state may deteriorate. They might become paranoid, distrustful of everyone, or overly cynical. Extreme isolation distorts their ability to see things clearly, making them more susceptible to manipulation. Their decision-making could be influenced by fear or desperation rather than rational thought. 4. Self-destructive behaviors. In some cases, extreme isolation can lead to self-destructive thoughts or actions. They might start engaging in risky behaviors like self-harm or even contemplate suicide, believing that there is no way out of their loneliness. This often comes from a place of hopelessness, the belief that nothing in life will ever improve. 5. Loss of personal identity. Over time, someone who's isolated can lose sight of who they are. Without the feedback and support of others, they may start doubting their own identity, values, and desires. They might feel as though they've become a shadow of themselves, or that they don't know who they are anymore. This loss of self can be one of the most profound consequences of isolation. Solutions for people in isolation. If someone finds themselves in this situation, recovery is possible, but it requires effort and support. Here are some ways to start the process of healing and rebuilding connections. One, recognize the isolation. The first step is to recognize that isolation is happening. Many people in these situations don't realize they're being manipulated or that they're isolating themselves. Acknowledging that you feel disconnected or that you're being influenced by negative forces is crucial. This may involve self-reflection or talking to someone who can help identify the signs. 2, reach out to trusted individuals. Even when it feels impossible, the next step is to reach out. Contact a friend, family member, or mentor, someone you trust, even if it feels uncomfortable. Talking to someone about how you're feeling, whether it's about loneliness or confusion, can break the cycle of isolation. They can offer a perspective that you may not have considered when you're stuck in a loop of negative thoughts. 3, therapy and professional support. A therapist or counselor can provide much needed guidance and support. Therapy offers a safe space to express feelings of isolation and emotional pain, while also giving strategies to build healthier relationships. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT for example, helps individuals challenge distorted thinking patterns like those that feed isolation. 4, join support groups. Sometimes it's easier to connect with others who have been through similar experiences. Support groups, whether online or in person, can provide a sense of community. People in these groups often offer validation and shared experiences, which can help someone feel less alone and more understood. 5, rebuild social connections gradually. It's important to understand that building relationships takes time. You might feel hesitant or even fearful of reconnecting, but it's essential to start small. Reach out to old friends, join clubs, or participate in activities that foster social interaction. Whether it's a hobby, an interest group, or a class, being in spaces where you can meet new people will help rebuild your sense of community. Focus on self-care